There's nothing this man can't do. Please help me welcome to the stage, Chris Potter!
What an introduction. Thank you.
Only the
I
best.
forgot I worked on an oil rig, but I did.
Well, I mean, that's the beauty of Wikipedia, right?
Yeah, I guess so. There was no Wikipedia back when I worked on an oil rig.
So that actually...
Or cell phone.
So just kind of walk me through here, Chris. So growing up, you wanted to be a professional athlete. Your father, who was an ex-pro himself, kind of forbid it. So like many people around that age that might have resented a little bit what their father said, you joined a rock band, right?
Right.
So
that was probably my mother's fault. But,
so fill in the blanks for me. How'd we go from aspiring pro athlete, rock star, to now movie star?
I think it's a pretty common story amongst many actors or performers that my family was a mixture of athletics and performing arts. My mother was involved in community theater and sang, and my dad was a former pro football player and coach in Canada. And we were raised to participate in both avenues, and I enjoyed both, but I probably once I got into high school, I tended to gravitate more toward the arts, and found it easy to pick up instruments, learn to play them, and I immediately started writing my own music. I didn't really have aspirations to be anybody in particular, but it was a great outlet for me because school was not a great outlet for me. That was another thing that really wasn't identified. There was no internet, there was no cell phones, and people didn't know what ADHD was back then. So there's a lot of me's out there trying to find their place.
Interesting obstacles you had to overcome.
Struggling with school, but loving school just the same. I was always involved in sports and always involved in the performing arts. So, yes, my rock and roll dream died after I toured for about 2 or 3 years.
Oh wow, got farther than most.
The bar circuit, and then the university, college bar circuits, and so on. And then things got real, and I went and worked in the insurance business with my father's company, the company he worked with. But I stayed involved in theater, and that morphed into what became my first chance at really a professional career, being discovered in an amateur play and being asked to audition for something professional, and then I just sort of went from there. So, but there was no guarantee that there was going to be a living to be made out of it, and I don't know. We may have all been faced with those points in your life where you've got to. I was married. I am still married to the same person, but we were just married and had a baby, our first child, and it was a big risk to step out of the world of secure paycheck and into trying to become an artist for a living. And thank goodness it worked out for me. And I've never lost sight of it. That I've never been too picky about what roles I've performed. I've just tried to be versatile and look for work that would be steady. And that's where Heartland comes in.
I was about to say, you were saying backstage about 18 years?
18 seasons we've done.
18 seasons, excuse me.
So, and that was actually toward, I started that in my mid-40s. So it really was a gift for me because I had been doing a lot of different series up to that. And the X-Men was one of the first I did in the early 90s. And that was while I was shooting Kung Fu, which was with David Carradine. So I was doing the Kung Fu series Monday to Friday, 14-hour day type job, and lots of action. And I was doing the X-Men occasionally on my lunch hour. And I'd go down and do all my voice work in the studio in Toronto. And we would do 20 shows a So it was a lot of work back then, and I was up for it. I was young.
I mean, that type of work. That's a young man's game.
Yeah, well, especially with action, because you do all the fighting and today I couldn't. Honestly, I'd need a couple days in between.
Just kind of a calm rest period.
Yeah, I was talking to John Schreiber about that this morning. The ground gets further
Every single
time.
time.
And I thought, yeah, that's interesting. I just talked to my wife about getting a new dog, and she said, "What about a small dog?" I said, "No, it has to be at least high enough that I don't have to bend over."
I said a dog, not a cat.
I don't want to have to bend over to give it attention. So maybe about this high, is that?
So before we get too carried away, this show is not only for you guys can also be a part of it. If you guys like, usually we have you guys line up, but now, Sunday it's a little bit more of an intimate show. If you guys just want to raise your hand, if you have any questions for Chris Potter, please feel free to raise your hand at any point during this interview. So you mentioned it before, X-Men, one of the biggest properties that you've been a part of outside of Young and the Restless and Heartland. So I wanted to first kind of dive into a little bit. At this point, were you at all familiar with X-Men or just any really cartoon?
I wasn't familiar with the X-Men. The only cast member there was George Booza, who plays Beast. He was a fanboy from way back. And they didn't identify it as the X-Men either when we auditioned. They identified it as Project X or something. And so none of us really knew, but George knew. I didn't. And speaking of the Young and the Restless, I was only on there for 3 months, and I think I'm still in jail in Genoa City.
So Young and the Restless has a close point in my heart specifically, because my mom, all growing up, that was always on TV. So whenever I would see Young and the Restless, I'd be like, okay, yeah, I know what that is. So then when I saw it, you were in Young and the Restless, like, oh my gosh.
I get it. Right.
Deep cut, I know.
Yeah, good.
So you get the role.
Well, the best part of doing the Young and the Restless
Tell me.
for me? Well, first of all those actors have the most secure jobs. Like they have parking spots, and it's like going to a factory for acting. You're going into the CBS studio.
Yeah.
But the best part of that for me was that for that 3 months, every time I worked, I would walk past Bob Barker's wheel from Price is Right. And it was sitting right there backstage.
Really?
And every day I'd go to work, I'd go.
Listen, guys, I'll tell you what.
And it's made of plywood. It's just a plywood thing with fancy colored paper on it. I was so disappointed. It's nothing flashy. But I would always spin it just because I could.
Let me tell you what, the fact that we have so many X-Men questions to talk about is honestly a professional courtesy to you guys. If it were up to me, we'd just talk about Young and the Restless. So, yes, ma'am. First off.
You just said that about Bob Barker just because you're at Springfield, right?
No, is he from here?
Yeah.
He is from here. Yeah.
Oh my God.
He went to Drury University.
Yeah, he went to Central, went to Drury. My mom grew up down the street.
I first discovered him as a kid. This is aging myself, but with Truth or Consequences.
Yeah.
I loved him on that.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I really enjoyed you on QAF too.
Oh, thank you.
I think that's probably when I first discovered you.
That was a lot of fun.
It was a great soap opera in its own right.
Yes, and funny cast. I mean, off camera. So I was always
So,
busting a gut on that show.
it's funny the connections to that too, because I worked for an organ procurement organization, and one of our doctors on our board was Scott Hall's brother.
Oh,
really?
Yeah, I didn't find that out till well into it, so.
Yeah, that was a 1 year stint for me because unfortunately this is a business, and
Yeah.
without getting too deep into it, often the reason people leave things or lured away is it's like sports, it's money. And unfortunately, that was a show that did not pay. And it was exciting to be a part of, and it was cutting edge, it was new and important, but it was not. And I was shooting it in Toronto and living in San Diego. So at the end of the day, I just said to them, I can't do another year of it. And I got an offer to do a show with Jolie Fisher called Wild Card.
Oh, okay.
And that one did pay, so.
You got
kind of weigh your options.
I have
It's a nice, I like the character.
the woman I mentioned that I married and still married to. We ended up with 4 kids, and so they're all adults now. But yeah, a lot of my choices were dictated by how much.
Had to kind of prioritize what put food on the table and what didn't.
Yeah, and then colleges and cars. Each one of them wrecked a car. No fault of their own, but boy, that was a dreadful period. Well, they all got T-boned or hit or something.
Okay, I was curious if is this like some sort of like Potter's curse or?
It was for a while. I was dreading phone calls. I'd hear my wife go, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Oh no, God."
Honey, one of them crashed the car again.
All I'm thinking is, "Oh, that's gonna be $5,000 if I'm lucky."
If you're lucky, I was about to say if you're lucky.
Anyway.
So circling back a little bit towards X-Men. So originally you were cast as Cyclops and.
No, I was originally cast as Gambit.
Gambit, excuse me,
The
Gambit.
one and only, yeah.
And we were going through that. You weren't a fan of X-Men at this point.
Well, I didn't know anything. It wasn't that I wasn't a fan. I read comics as a boy, but not the X-Men. And so it was new to me. Yeah, and so was developing the
I was about to
character.
say, and then at this point you hadn't really done any voiceover work, is that correct?
No.
So going into the studio for the first time, was there a little bit of a new, you had been acting at this point, but not so much with voiceover work. Was there at any point, were you a little extra nervous because this was a new experience for you?
Well, I'm always nervous for some reason. I think that helps.
I feel like that's just part of the gig.
Yeah. But I was a bit insecure in that first season because we would record as a group in the studio in the first season 1 of X-Men, which meant that I had all these new people beside me performing who were super talented and but again, hilarious. So there were a lot of laughs, but I was nervous, and some of them were good at impersonations, and occasionally they'd ask for these bit parts to be played in the show that were outside of your main character. And I never put up my hand for that because the other guys could do impersonations, so the director would say, well, we need a kind of a Jack Nicholson, and then Cal Dodd would do his Jack Nicholson.
Bust out a Jack.
But then Norm Spencer would do his, he'd say, that's not Nicholson, this is Nicholson. And they'd be arguing, trying to make the extra dollars for the little parts. And I was just sitting there, I can't participate in this.
Can't believe what I've said.
I'm one character only, this guy.
What's
So,
that?
was it like a struggle to develop the accent, or did it come easy to you?
It came pretty easy to me, but I mean, I was familiar with the Acadian culture in Canada, the East Coast French Canadians, and who left that area for opportunities in Louisiana to work. And I remember thinking, knowing something about that and realizing that that's what that Cajun patois was about. It was a southern accent with inflections of French Canadian. So, in other words, Gambit would always add things like, there's always more gators in the bayou shaft. And they throw in the French Canadian slang and pitsy. So I think I was speaking to a couple down here earlier today about voice work. Most of the X-Men cast came from theater and television. They didn't come from voice work. So they recast the X-Men at the beginning. They weren't happy with the voices. They were getting what they call voice actor voices, and not actors' voices, if that makes sense. But the process with acting often is going, you go inside and you're speaking from your heart and your soul, and you really break the character down and understand. And I understood him for some reason. I understood that character. Not that I related personally, but I understood him.
Something about him spoke to you and you were able to transfer that to the microphone.
And I think that resonated. I don't know if my accent was always consistent because they were constantly playing around with it. And I'd do a take and they'd say, well, try it this way, And so I remember the early years sometimes, but the root of it is what imprinted on people, and I think that's an important part about voicing anything that's not a TV commercial. But if you're doing an animated series or movie, you know, something about the soul of the character that has to come through. So,
Well, it was an early trailblazer too. I mean, at that point, Western animation, especially ones revolving around superheroes, did not have the luxury of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It didn't have the luxury of having now superheroes so front and center in the pop culture zeitgeist. So at the time, it was one of the early trailblazers trying to find a spot for superheroes. And
well, from an actor's perspective, though, they were all human beings, even though they had superpowers. That was the fun part.
that's like really the overarching part of the story, right?
Yeah, but you know, identifying with the human being to me with Gambit was really, you know, the type of person we all feel that we are at times. We're on the outside, just want to be loved. You're trying to find your people, and then when you do, in his case, he falls in love with someone he can't touch. You know, it's life.
Yeah.
And
Punches you right in the gut too.
and he was a one-off. He came from a family of thieves whose natural inclination was to play outside the rules, and yet he was born with, you know, a good sense of right and wrong. So he chose right. But so I always played him that way. But with bravado and confidence, and that's the part people love. But inside, you're dying. You know, you're hurt. You're hurting, and you're afraid.
Which genuinely is something that I feel like all viewers can at least relate to some degree.
Yeah, yeah. And I think I also wanted to play that character back then. I was probably in my early 30s, so I wanted to play a character that I thought young people would think was cool. And I think, you know, this is how I'll play.
Oh, you absolutely nailed it on that part. And then years later, decades later, when they are re-upping the series, continuing on and doing some new things, you come back, not necessarily as Gambit, you come back as Cable.
Well, yeah, and be honest, to this day I don't know why, but I really don't. The explanation I was given was that they were going to kill Gambit.
Oh my God.
And they wanted me to be a part of it still. And I said, okay.
It's flattering to a degree.
I said, I want to be a part of it, but
But you spent all this time building such a rapport with this character to now have to start basically fresh.
yeah, and without any instruction at all. I mean, I literally went in and did my first session as Cable without, I hadn't even listened to Cable from back in the day, and I know Lawrence Bain, who played Cable, and I thought he did a great job. So it was a different voice. Cable speaks more from his throat, you know, and Gambit always talking. Don't come from here, down to that friend. He's silly smooth, man. There's always
It was an exercise in range.
And so I find I taste blood in my throat when I do that.
Oh,
I mean,
I do it.
It's a new definition of
sounds like he's like a chain smoker, but
Yeah,
because
almost.
he's
Yeah.
just all the gunfires.
a new definition of bleed
aged
for
him,
the,
aged him.
Yeah.
new definition of bleed for the craft, right?
Yeah, but you know, I did it, and no one said stop doing it. Stop doing it that way. So that's your Cable. Weird thing is, when I go in I guess because in my mind I am Gambit. I feel like I'm Gambit doing Cable.
I mean, I feel like he might be doing that to like further traumatize Scott just for giggles. Like, ha! Hey, look, here's your son that you can't have.
I love Cable. Cable's got some good stuff going on too. I can't really talk about
Talk
season
too much
2,
about it.
Oh no, I'm excited.
but it's if you read the comics, you know, follow over, and it's going to be really good.
They should start
I just
doing
wish
the
they'd do more episodes. It's hard to, for all of you that were kids watching the original, you know, you got 20 shows a year. I did 75 episodes as Gambit. So it gave you something to look forward to every week. Whereas now, you can stream all 6 episodes in one afternoon and wait 2 years. And it's tough to grab an audience.
It's tough to be one, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, tough to be one. So, give us more, you know. But in fairness, I thought they did a really great job with 97. It's beyond me. It's so deep. There's so many Easter eggs and flashbacks. And what do they call them? You know, callbacks and whatever.
References and whatnot.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yes.
I wanted to touch back on 97. I remember, I think it was episode 5 that really screwed everybody up. When you got told about that, did you start like freaking out? Because personally, when I saw it, there's now a hole in my drywall. I got so like, are you kidding me?
I don't think that's the only hole in drywall.
Yeah, no,
I think
yeah,
there's
she
many
almost
victims
smashed
out
it.
there.
Yeah.
Doors, walls, yeah, that was a
I was
powerful
like, are
idea.
you kidding me? What?
I think it was 5, right,
Yeah.
when Gambit dies.
Yeah. Because I remember seeing Cable like being like Madeline, and then everything just.
Well, think about that from my perspective.
You probably wanted to cry.
Well, there I am, no longer playing Gambit, playing a new character who's coming to warn everyone that his old character is going to die.
Yeah.
I mean, that's Bo DeMaio.
Yeah.
Like that was.
I mean, 75 episodes, there's no way a part of you wasn't connected to that
Well,
character.
that was freaky to me. It was like, I'm actually coming to warn everybody that
Yeah.
my old character is going to die here.
Almost
That was a
feels like-
weird thing. I was a little angry actually.
Yeah.
Almost
No.
feels like a personal attack against you.
Well,
honestly, go fight.
yeah.
Go fight.
I took it personal.
Go. I would pay to see you and DeMaio doing like a fist fight in a Denny's parking lot. At 2 a.m. I
I'm
swear.
okay with it.
My money's on you, dude.
I'm okay with
Let's
it.
aim for his ankle.
So we have about 5 minutes before we have to wrap this one up. So I did want to ask one more question for you. So as an actor that has been in this circle for a number of years, both on stage, in front of a camera, and behind a microphone, for the folks out there, maybe here or at the Expo Center, that have been wanting to get into this space, that have been wanting to follow their dreams of being professional actors or actresses themselves, what were some early tips that you would advise them that maybe you learned that you wish you knew?
Well, I just had this conversation with this couple.
Funny.
It's a question I've been asked my entire career, more so in the past 10 years, I think. But it's not uncommon to get a call from somebody who's a friend of somebody whose daughter or son wants to become an actor, and how can my little Joni,
My little Jimmy.
become an actor? And usually the first clue to me is when I make the suggestion, well, have they done a play yet? Well, no, not yet. Oh, okay, well, do a play at school, or do local community theater. Well, no, but they want to do, like, who's your agent? That's right away people go to, who's your agent? Because that's the secret, the agent. Well, it's not the secret. My agent sucks.
Is that him?
I was about to say, just making sure, that's not
No,
exactly.
no, but there's a saying, changing agents is like changing deck chairs on the Titanic, you know.
That's.
So, the answer is, again, it comes from involvement. And there is no, everybody's got a different story, but my experience is if you want to do this as a profession, then you need to get involved, and you need to do it where, like anything in your life that you're passionate about. Listen, if you need to suddenly shovel snow and decide, well, I got to go get a shovel.
Sure.
So you do. Otherwise, you're not in the business of shoveling snow. So it's the same with work and careers. You know, you just try to wade into it somehow. I want to be an actor. Okay, I go to local community theater. How do I get involved? Well, we need somebody to clean up after people leave. Well, I was thinking about the star part. Well, we don't have star part right now. But you're welcome to be part of our community.
Get your foot
And
in there.
then you do a play, and then you do, and if you've got some talent, it rises to the surface, and amongst the people you're with, and it continues to rise. And if you're professionally oriented, you'll be able to compete with the best in the world. And I think it's like that for many careers, sports, and so on. Now, that would be my secret way, just get involved. But I know it's vague, but it's not a clear trajectory in this business. And I must warn you that most of the time, it's a career that you are constantly in pursuit of getting a job.
You're constantly applying for it.
Yeah. And then once you have the job and it's going swimmingly, you find out, for some bizarre reason, you no longer have the job. It's been canceled.
Sometimes completely outside of your control.
So people ask me about Heartland. They'll say, 18 years, that's fantastic. So you're going to do another one? And my answer is, sitting here right now, we wrapped in September. It's February, and I don't know if we're doing another season. And if we are, it'll start on May 1st. 18 years of this, where no one calls me and says, pretty soon we'll know. Nothing, no correspondence, just either a phone call every year, yes, we're going again, or nope, you're out of a job. And it's a strange way to live if you're trying to make a plan in your life, financially or anything else, so even a trip. So, but it's the business for me, and I highly recommend it. My path has been, I've been very fortunate, so I haven't been too picky. I think that's the secret.
There you go. Don't be too picky.
Don't be too picky.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Mr. Chris Potter. Now, before we all break away, if you guys wouldn't mind joining us at the front of the stage, we'd love to grab a group photo.